I wrote a book thinking that it would ever, first of all, even be published. I did it as just a fun passion project that I was going to self-publish and give to like 3 friends. And someone wanted to publish it, and not only did that happen, it became an international bestseller, and then Hollywood came calling. I'm Kevin Kwan, and I'm a writer, and I wrote Crazy Rich Asians.
What's watch is in?
Paul Newman.
Back in 2018, this movie came out.
These people aren't just rich, okay? They're
Crazy Rich Asians.
Now, I'm not usually the one to watch rom-coms, but my girlfriend, now wife, dragged me into this one. Now, I didn't know what to expect, especially when this popped on the screen. The ultimate grail within the watch community. It wasn't until I read an article by Eric Wynn of Wynn Vintage, the effort it took to get this watch on screen for just a 2-second shot. I knew I had to get more of the story, so I figured, why not get the story from the man himself?
This is a big story.
No, because I've got the watch.
Ready?
It was Monday, May 1st, 2017. I happened to be in Orlando at Disney World. I'm sitting at breakfast with my wife and son and look down at my phone and see an email came through that said, urgent, amazing watch needed for Crazy Rich Asians movie.
It was through an email, yeah. Because, you know, when you're filming a movie, this literally happened, like, in real time within a week. Certain watches were offered. We talked, and I was like, no, that's not gonna be right. And I was like, well, you know, you can go to this store, this store, this store. And I know there are a few collectors in the region that maybe would lend it to us, but, you know, let me talk to Eric.
The email from Kevin said they needed a watch in about 30 hours in Malaysia for filming a scene where one of the lead characters, Astrid, gives her husband a watch.
So I'll be honest, I don't really read as many books as I'd like to, but to really understand the differences between the film and the novel, reading this book was pretty important.
From what I remember from the book and into the movie, there is no specific watch that was gifted.
There is no gifting watch scene at all. That was something that was done in the film adaptation, where we really needed a scene to set up the relationship between Astrid and her husband, Michael. So Astrid is, you know, the character in the movie who really was born like a princess, right? She is a double heiress. She's an heiress to 2 huge fortunes. So she has always known this world of the most beautiful things. They've always been sort of at her fingertips. And she's lived and breathed in this world where it's always accessible to her. But she marries Michael, who is a working class chap, who's actually done very well for himself. You know, he became sort of like and sort of really excelled in the Singapore military, became a hero, and then, you know, from that parlayed it into sort of a tech business. But he's a self-made man, and he's still sort of striving and climbing, whereas she's already at the top. So that creates a very uneven power dynamic that is at the root of his insecurity.
Well, I'm just this lucky bastard who will never measure up.
Don't say that.
In this scene in the movie,
How much?
she had just spent a lot of money
1.2 million.
on, you know, one of these incredible heirloom pieces of jewelry. And I think out of guilt in a way, but also because she does want to acknowledge an important moment in his business life, she decides that she wants to buy him a present.
Oh, actually, I'll introduce myself. I'm Justine Dunn. I was the props master on Crazy Rich Asians. I was really struggling with trying to find a watch that fit the bill. The character Astrid, she would have sourced it, she would have done her research, she would have probably gone to somebody like Eric Wynn.
There was a watch from Hublot that had been lent for the movie, but Kevin thought it might be better to get a more interesting watch for watch collectors. The director, John Chu, also thought it would be good. He himself is a bit of a watch guy.
Hey, what's going on? I'm John M. Chu.
One of the reasons he's such a brilliant filmmaker is because he pays attention to every single detail. And so, of course, with this very important watch, it had to be the right watch.
I was in touch with JLC, Ilanga and Sana. I was in touch with collectors about trying to get a 5970 Patek Philippe. I thought it should be something, you know, iconic but interesting to watch collectors. That was essentially the mandate.
I had sent John Chu The most expensive watch that I could get in Malaysia and get permission to use, which at the time was a watch that was worth around $100,000. It was a Hublot watch. It was on product placement. So I'd sent John a picture of this really beautiful Hublot watch, and he was like, yeah, that's really beautiful, but let me just check with Kevin.
It couldn't be something super basic, obviously, but I'm certainly glad it was not an Hublot.
I guess Hublot is sort of not quite, doesn't quite have the crown that...
Yeah, right. Not that there's anything wrong with Hublot, it's just, well, you know, it just wouldn't be that special. And plus, Kevin is right. The character Astrid would probably never consider an Hublot in the first place.
I had no luck. I contacted my friend Eric Koo, who was a dealer who I thought might be able to help, and he said, I sold a Paul Newman Daytona recently to a guy in Singapore. Let me ask him.
So luckily, the wife of the collector had read the book and knew how successful the book was, and she convinced her husband to loan this watch worth $500,000 to a bunch of people that he'd never met, and basically handed over to a stranger.
They sent a security guard to fly from Malaysia to Singapore to pick up the watch.
So we employed one of those security guards who we'd had before, but his only job was to keep his eyes on that watch. And when it wasn't on set, he was meant to be looking after it. Next door was a bit of a green room, and that's where we'd put the security guard. But there was also a bed in that room. Dylan was our standby on set. He'd come to get the watch to take it back onto set, and the security guard was fast asleep.
And we had to fire the security guard when we found him just basically sleeping next to the watch, which anyone could have just picked up and taken with them at any point. When the movie came out, I was invited to an early screening in New York City. It was maybe the most nervous I've ever been going into a movie theater, wondering when the scene would be, would the watch actually be shown? I had very little information. I don't think I blinked the entire movie because I didn't want to miss a moment where this watch was in the movie.
Seeing the movie on premiere night, and when that watch first made its appearance,
I love it.
There was a gasp. There was a loud, loud gasp. And I believe Daniel Day Kim was the one who gasped.
I just started wearing from True North. It's a collaboration with True North and Eric Wind. And
Sure. I was not expecting to see that many great watches in the movie, let alone that Paul Newman Daytona. It felt like a 5-second shot to me, just because it was just honed in on that still. And I think it was only like two seconds.
Literally.
Yeah. But I was like, look, there's...
Of course, there's a scene, the husband was shirtless, which I was very surprised at. And she hands him the watch and it's basically said, you're a CEO now, you deserve a great watch. And there's a brief split second where they show the watch.
Have you ever felt this?
It was a very gratifying experience for the Academy Awards. Rolex the last several years has done a movie advertisement commercial, and I was watching the TV and they ran the Rolex commercial and it featured that scene, and my jaw dropped again at that moment, thinking that all happened because of that fateful kind of 24-hour period of me trying to find watches back in May 2017.
Only to feel this is exactly where you were meant to be.
For vintage Rolex collectors, the Paul Newman Daytona has become one of the most iconic watches in the world. When I sourced the Paul Newman Daytona for the movie, it was months before Paul Newman's own Paul Newman Daytona came to auction.
This is, to many here in the room, the most iconic wristwatch of the 20th century. The one and only Paul Newman of Paul Newman.
And sold for $17.8 million. I didn't even know that watch existed or where it was at that point. But even before that happened, it was one of the most iconic and desirable vintage Rolex watches. The earliest version of the so-called Paul Newman Daytona had this unusual exotic dial with these small boxes in the registers. The earliest reference is the reference 6239, which is the first reference of vintage Daytona. It had Daytona in red on the dial, these small boxes in the registers for the chronograph so that it was easier to read when you were driving. And in fact, it was a commercial failure. They did not sell well. Very few were made, and for decades they were not very desirable. One of the things that helped kickstart the popularity of the watch in the 1990s was the fact that photos began circulating of Paul Newman himself wearing the same watch with the white dial, a reference 6239. Collectors began giving these watches the nickname Paul Newman in his honor, and then it suddenly caught on like wildfire. It took a while, but by the late 1990s, these watches were going for around $25,000, when in the early 1990s, they were around $2,000 to $3,000. So they really took off. By the time we had sourced the watch for the movie, this was around $500,000. The Panda version, which is more desirable. Basically, as time went on, they switched from the steel bezel to a black acrylic bezel, and they did screw-down pushers, more like a modern Daytona today. It helped in case you were underwater. The pusher was locked in place, so water couldn't get in if it was depressed. This is the last reference of Paul Newman Daytona that was made with this exotic dial, the reference 6263. The nickname of this version is also the Panda because there is no red on the dial. It's purely black and white. This particular example has aged to a bit of a brown color for the black due to UV and heat, but which is very interesting and desirable to collectors. It's called the tropical dial. But there's no red anywhere on the dial, whereas the early ones had Daytona in red and a red seconds track on the outer edge of the dial. So this is a 3-color dial versus a 2-color dial. Collectors are just very excited about any Paul Newman Daytona, whether steel or gold, whether a white dial, black dial, yellowish dials in gold cases, black dials in gold cases, etc. There's a black dial version of the reference 6263 called the RCO, which I've sold for over $1 million. And they're just extremely desirable and special watches. The combination of Paul Newman's own watch selling for $17.8 million, one of the highest prices paid for any wristwatch ever. The fact it was in the Crazy Rich Asians movie has helped elevate the watch even further to iconic object status around the world. I'm Eric Wind of Wind Vintage, and this channel is Clicky Bezel.
That's good.
Sweet. Awesome. Thank you, Chris. So cool. That's fun.
Thank you so much, guys, for watching, and a huge thank you to Eric Wind of Wind Vintage. Without him, this video would literally not be possible. And also, thank you so much to Kevin Kwan and Justine Dunn for taking the time out of their busy schedules and being a part of this video. And lastly, to Andrew Vargas, a realtor and friend of mine, for helping us film in this beautiful Brentwood home location, located at 401 26th Street. And if you guys are interested in owning this home, feel free to reach out to him. And as always, I'm Chris. This channel's Clicky Bezel, and we'll see you on the next one.